All right, welcome to lecture 4 of April 7th, and this will be it for the week as you begin to move through. This last little bit is just simply going to walk you through your exegesis format, and I have created digital slides there in your canvas that will help you to walk through this. I'm going to talk through this, but then we're going to continue to work through this over the next couple of weeks so that you're very clear as you sit down to write your exegesis what it is that I'm intending for this exegesis to look like. All right, so look at your exegesis format slides. We're going to walk through these. The first part of your exegesis is going to be an introduction. I don't want you to just simply tell me, hey, I'm going to do a exegesis on this, and this is what it's going to cover. Use your introduction to capture the reader. Too often people don't do this. In an introduction, a paragraph is about engaging the reader. Make it matter. Why do I even care that I want to spend the next, probably for me, half an hour reading your paper? Why do I even care to? So make it matter. Bring something to light. Draw me in. Use your words meaningfully on that first paragraph of that first introduction to capture the attention of the reader, and then tell me how you're going to help me to understand what this text means. Then you're going to move to writing underneath your introduction your scriptural text, and I want that in single space. Okay, I want the whole text there because then I can refer back to, and I'll know which translation that you have utilized in this. Then I want you to move into section 1, and you can actually label it section 1, world behind the text. You need about 1 to 3 pages talking about the history of the book, of the scripture where your text is found. When was it written? Are there any substantial historical issues surrounding the book? So for instance, if you're, and we've used Daniel as an example throughout this class. If you're writing the book of Daniel, when was Daniel written? What were the historic circumstances surrounding Daniel? And why does that matter given your exegesis? Identify the author. Who is it? Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. Is there any work that has been done in terms of source criticism, where it potentially might have come from, who it might have come through? Are there any relevant historical elements that we need to know in terms of the author? How might the author's life, if we know the author, influenced or affected how we've come to interpret or make sense of the scripture? That's getting to know that dance partner of the author. And then we need 3 to 5 pages in which you're going to talk about all the relevant historical concerns surrounding the text. Cultural, political, economic, geographic, religious. What is this world? Reconstruct the world that's happening in this text. What are the elements that I wouldn't understand given my historical distance? What has happened economically, politically that might have impacted how we understood and why this text comes to light in the way it does? So if you're writing on something, if you're dealing with something in Kings and it talks about the kings, you need to help the reader understand that the book of Kings, especially if it's written after Solomon, is happening in a divided nation. That the divided nation happened as a result of Jeroboam and Rehoboam dividing the nation between a northern kingdom, southern kingdom, 10 tribes north, 2 tribes south. You need to give some concise, clear historical data that helps us to understand where this particular text is located within the history of Israel, or within the history of the early church, or within the history of the Jewish disciples. So if your text has something to do with the Pharisees, you need to be able to identify who exactly are the Pharisees, especially as the Pharisees are held in terms of the relationship to potentially the Sadducees or Jesus' disciples. You need to understand the historical elements and details that shape and form your text. And then you need to identify no less than 5 words from the text that stand out in the original language. So you're going to read through your text, and are there 5 words that just seem to grab you? 5 words that you wish, you wonder, does this add nuance, texture, richness to the text if I knew what maybe this word meant in the original language? And then you go to Bible Hub and you can do your lexical work. You can talk about the ways in which it's used in other settings, and try to help us if there is at some level some way in which a word is used that might enhance our understanding or meaning of the text. Do that grammatical work, okay? And that'll be a section. So you've got your half-page introduction. You've got your 1 to 3 pages of text, of book of scripture, and then author, and then 3 to 5 pages in terms of your historical elements, cultural, religious, economic, and then your word study as well. Go down one more slide. This is going to be section 2, the world of the text. This is going to be about 2 to 4 pages, depending on the kind of text that you have. You're going to identify the genre of literature, and why does that genre of literature matter, and how does that genre of literature, is it a letter, is it a poem, is it a proverb, what is it? Are there elements within the actual text itself that need to be ferreted out as well? So is there a genre within a genre? Are there rhetorical devices being used? Metaphors, analogy, chiastic structures, parallelism, hyperbole, etc. These elements that might inform or shape the meaning of the text itself. Does dialogue, is this text have dialogue in it? And how does dialogue, redundancies, characterization impact our understanding of the text? And then you're going to want to locate this text within its immediate context, like the texts that come immediately before and after, within the larger context of the book that it's found itself, within the Old or New Testament, how does it fit, and then within the canon. And are there comparative texts that this connects with, that you need, that are relevant to the exegetical work? And then section 3, which is the world in front of the text, which is 1 to 3 pages. What are the theological doctrines that we are already bringing to the text that might influence or affect our meaning of the text? So if I'm reading Jesus, it's possible that I might be reading a certain soteriology or a certain Christology into the reading of that text. And you'll be able to find that a lot of times within the context of different articles and commentaries that will point to the ways in which theology informs how we read those texts. What biases, assumptions, presumptions might impact. So if you look at the extended audience, those elements that I just talked about in that one slide, what are the presumptions? What are the biases? What are the expectations that we may bring to the text that might warp or twist or shape how we engage the text in a meaningful way? So we want to be aware of. So if I'm reading a text that is specifically harsh on women, I need to recognize that we now live in a culture where we tend to think more of equality between men and women, though it's still being worked out, definitely, but we tend to think in terms those that might be inconsistent with the way in which the world of the text, or world behind the text, would have operated. So we understand that we bring those assumptions to the text. We need to be able to name those things. And are there any substantive arguments from, for instance, feminist theologians, liberation theologians, post-colonial theologians, or any other kind of world in front of the text kind of theological tradition that might shape how we engage that text? And I think that's really important for us to understand as well in terms of our making sense. And again, you'll be able to get those from the articles that you research about your text, that you'll get from the ATLA database and from the library resources, from the commentaries. They'll point to the ways in which maybe that text has been appropriated and used in recent years. And then your section 4 is 1 to 3 pages. In the final section, you're going to suggest how you might interpret this text in a faithful and adequate way for a congregation, given the exegetical work that you've done. So now that you've done all that hard work, why does it matter? Who does it matter for, and in what ways does it matter? And you're going to spend about 1 to 3 pages talking about that. Why might this text matter to a congregation? How might they hear this in a meaningful way? And so part of this work that we're doing in exegesis is for hermeneutics, the way of making some meaning for the people that I find myself in front of, and in what way and how does that meaning happen? And so I really want to encourage you to look at that, to identify that, and to wrestle through that as we make our way through this. And so that gives you a little bit about your format, and so it kind of breaks things up, gives you an idea, gives you an idea for the length. You're going to want to make sure you fall within the ultimate, at least the bare minimum of what I'm asking for. But in this, I give you some ideas as to the kind of length that you might expect in these different sections as you begin to work through and write your exegesis, and what I'll be looking for and what I'll be expecting. So spend some time with this, look it over, start analyzing this in terms of your passage, start utilizing this even as an outline as you start putting pieces in there, and then as we get together next Wednesday and have a conversation with your other classmates, we can spend a little bit more time talking about how this impacts you and what you're finding and what difficulties and challenges you're facing as you do your exegetical work. All right, great week, and look forward to talking to you more as we move forward. Thanks. Have a great day.